Hi YouTube, this is the Maineprepper, and today we're going to be looking at the Smith & Wesson Search and Rescue knife, and it is a sheath knife, one piece, not a folder, and it is a pretty good knife. Bottom line up front, it's okay for $23.95. It's a pretty good knife. The knife is good, the sheath needs some work on it. We're going to talk about the sheath, and I'm pretty big on a good sheath. And the good thing is you're buying mostly knife with this. You're not spending a lot on a sheath, so if you want a better sheath, you can buy it. That being said, I would have liked to see a little bit better quality control on this sheath. But let's talk about the knife first, shall we? Survival knife, for those of you that have been to survival school, you know that if there's a survival knife in your kit, it needs to not only be a weapon, but also a tool. Insofar as a weapon goes and a fighting knife, let's cover those real quickly, those points. And this has all of the features of a fighting knife that you would need. The basic features that every fighting knife must have is a point with a sharpened blade on at least one side, and a crossguard or quillion, a handle with knurl so that your hands will not slip if they get bloody, and a pommel so that if you have to pull back, you can. The blade tip needs to be in line so that if you're stabbing or thrusting or even using this for doing augering type work out in the field, your knife is going to stay on balance. The blade on one side, of course, is essential, otherwise it's not even a knife. Also, while we're talking, this is not a blood groove, that is in fact a balancing groove. Those grooves cut on the back side of a knife are designed to help the knife maker lighten the blade and to balance the blade. This one balances fairly well just behind the crossguard or quillion. It's a little bit hard for me to hold. There we go. Right there is the balancing point. The crossguard or quillion is a feature that should not be left off of any knife, both for utility or for fighting. Now, if you're using this for skinning, where you're always going to be slashing and never pushing and stabbing or drilling holes, that's fine. But if this is going to be a survival knife, it needs to be also a fighter and a tool that has multi-purposes, not just one direction. Therefore, if I'm stabbing and I should hit the enemy's gear or his bones, my hand could slide up the blade and cut me. If I am working on something to auger it or awl with it, I could also push forward with a lot of weight and slice my hand open. A good crossguard is very inexpensive to put on, but it's left off for artistic reasons from knives that are supposedly fighting knives, which they actually aren't because they're missing this important feature. And let me show you the real reason why you have a crossguard for a fighting knife. The parry and thrust. Fighting knives, by the way, of this design were come up with, the actual engineering and the design were come up with by interviewing and talking to soldiers in World War I and II that had been in actual knife fights, and a lot of them, and used this for a lot of killing. When you're in a knife fight, and we were trained when I was in boot camp, if somebody's slashing at you with their knife and you cannot get your body out of the way and you must use your knife to block, you do what's called a parry. And when you parry, notice how the blade will come down because he's thrusting and slashing at you, and this actually serves to trap the blade from hitting your hand. Now he's going to pull back quick and try to slash you, but you can parry and push back with this. You cannot do that if this piece is not there. The only thing you'll be parrying with is your thumb, and you'll quickly lose it if you don't have that. The other reason I like the crossguard is because it allows you to have positive control with your thumb and also with your fingers, so you can have a little bit of, when you're doing finite work, you've got a safe place for your thumb and your forefinger to go. All right. The pommel on this is very nice. It's good for a little bit of light hammering, but more importantly, a good knife is a single piece of steel. In the early days of knife making, it was a file, literally a file for like filing metal or wood, that had lost its teeth, and they would simply reforge it with the blacksmith forge, and where the handle was, that became the knife tang. And so often the handle only went down partway into the actual hand grips. Modern knives don't have that restriction. They are cut or forged from a single piece of steel that runs from tip to the end of the tang. And what I like about this is the tang, running full length, goes into the pommel, and you can see the tang by that rectangle, and it is affixed to the pommel via a stainless steel pin that goes all the way through both sides. That is a very positive control. Better than glue, better than a weld. You know if it's locked on there because you can check the pins. And so that's a nice thing because that's going to keep the handle on. That being said, this handle does appear to be glued on with a strong polymer type glue, and it is a rubberized type handle. The tang on this knife also is firmly affixed to altogether, the handle, tang, everything all firmly fixed, and this cross guard appears to be notched in, and so it's a very solid lock in here. I like it because I've had others and this is just a little bit loose on them. This one is tight. So this one is rock solid and tight. It's a 440C steel, I believe, although I could find no accurate data in the instructions or the paperwork that came with the knife. However, it seems similar to my other knives, which have a similar 440C. If you want to see, there's a link here if you're on YouTube, and it will show you a treatise, if you will, a very quick overview on what these numbers mean. The 410, 440, and 1095 numbers essentially deal with hardness. If it's a lower number like a 410 or a 440 or even a 420, those sharpen easy, but they also lose their edge a little quicker. A 1095 tends to retain its hardness a bit longer. That may be a factor, especially if you don't want to do a lot of sharpening or you're only going to use it on occasion for something like chopping, etc. 440 has always worked good enough for me. 1095, I have a couple of those and they're fine, but they take a bit longer to sharpen. So overall, for $23.95, it's a very good knife. I like it, and that's kind of my bottom line up front as well as towards the end. I do not like the sheath. Let's talk about the sheath for a moment. I'll put the knife inside. The sheath appears to be made out of a Kydex or a type of plastic, and that's good. I like a plastic sheath because it's not going to rot and there's not going to be stitching to come undone. Unfortunately, this has some issues. When I got it, this D-ring handle was pushed in, and that's not good. That tells me that there's not a lot of good quality control, and that's okay, it's easy to fix. But it also shows that these screws, which attach this nylon webbing strap, are not run all the way through. They're just screwed into the plastic handle. So it's kind of poorly constructed, poorly put together. It does have pretty good machine stitching here and there, but there are some other things. This is what bothers me probably the most right here where my finger is pointing. That is crooked. I don't know if you can see it. Let me pull this out. That's crooked. And it's not a big deal. It doesn't affect anything about the functionality of the knife, but folks, your name is there and you put it on crooked. Come on. So quality control is a bit low on at least the sheath. I'm pretty sure the knife is got a different quality control system on it. It has a Velcro strap that affixes on there. The Velcro is okay, it's not great. The nylon is a bit flimsy and weak. It won't last very long, I predict. However, I can keep it together with a bit of stitching. Interestingly, it has these belt loops for mounting horizontally onto a fairly wide belt, such as a military standard issue belt. But if you're going to wear it in a vertical fashion, be advised that the hole to fit your belt in is so small I can barely get my finger in. I guess it'll work if you're wearing it with your dress belt, but otherwise I'm going to have to take a few stitches out and hope that it doesn't unravel all of the stitching running down blade. So I am going a little bit into the sheath, but there are some issues with it when I got it. I do like the D-ring on the bottom. I do like the lanyard attachment points on the side. And on any survival knife, you really need a pouch. Now this pouch came with a Smith & Wesson grit type sharpener, and that's pretty good for a little bit. I've got a sharpener in my survival kit, however, but I may replace this with a double-sided grit stone. And there's room with that in there for my magnesium fire starter, or maybe a small cigarette lighter if I wanted to. And I like that feature very much. So this sheath needs a lot of improvement. However, the knife itself is pretty good. So folks, I like the Smith & Wesson Search and Rescue knife for $23.95. It's a pretty good deal. You could do probably a little better on the price for about the same quality of knife, and I'm going to show you that tomorrow. But overall, $23.95 is not bad. You certainly don't need to go whole hog and spend hundreds of dollars to get a good knife, which is the whole point of these videos that I'm making. Thank you, folks, for tuning in, and I hope to see you back soon.